All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. My name is Mark Lohman. I'm a Vice President of Software Development at Sophos. I've been with Sophos since 2015. And before Sophos, I had my own company called Surfright, and we developed software called Hitman Pro. Is anybody here familiar with the name Hitman Pro or the tool? Always nice to see. In 2013, people asked me, okay, you have a very nice second opinion scanner to remove malware that's not being detected by your installed antivirus. But wouldn't it be nice if you would be able to block this from being installed in the first place? You don't keep the machine malware free. And we did not want to create the same software that everybody else had. So we looked at the different ways on how we can keep hackers out of your machines, and especially also in 2013 there was the rise of ransomware with CryptoLocker, and we've seen we at that time we noticed if this is going to take flight, then we have a real problem on our hands, because that was the first ransomware that was at large that used asymmetric encryption. Which cannot be easily reversed without the proper key. So as mentioned, we were acquired in 2015 by Sophos. Just 9 months later, we developed, based on our Hitman Pro alert software, the Sophos Intercept X product. And in 2021, our software is running on 50 million endpoints. So I guess we're well over that by now. So today I'm going to talk a little bit on how we can modify Windows, because I think Windows is a bit too open. It gives you unlimited freedom when you have access to that machine, and the same freedom is enjoyed by the attackers, because the attackers nowadays, they don't break in, they nowadays log in, because they somehow gained your credentials either through for VPN. Or some other way they bought it, and in order to maintain persistence, they bring their malware, and often, well, more than often, this malware that they bring along is obfuscated, and to evade the defenses, they obfuscate it to evade the defenses, and this obfuscation is often encryption. It's good to know, because I will let you know why, how they encrypt it, but. They encrypt it because they don't want to create a new malware for each each attack that they plan. So you've probably heard from, even though they're appearing more ransomware every week. Yeah, it looks like there's a new ransomware every week, a new name, but they all have the same objective. And especially if you have a ransomware actor like Black Cat, they keep using the same code. But this code is every time differently obfuscated, because otherwise it would be very easy for antivirus to spot it on a hash, for example. So that's why they obfuscate their malware, but the underlying behavior is always the same. The objective is the same. Because and this behavior, it can even maybe looks a little bit difficult, but this is how we block ransomware, and also can revert the encrypted files that are hit by ransomware. But especially I wanted to have your focus a little bit on those black bars, the black boxes, because this is for every ransomware the same. First, they open the file. They use a system function called create file. They open it for read or write. Well, often both. They read the file, they encrypt it in the bytes in memory. They write the file and they close it. It's always the same. But it's also the same for when you open a file in Word. Word opens the file, does create file, read file, encrypt, write file, close file. So this is really typical behavior of when you work with files. But what we do with our approach is we piggyback on the memory buffers from the ransomware itself. We create histogram of it, and when the file is about to be written, our ransomware protection operates from the kernel. We We make a copy of the file in memory, and we investigate the written blocks which are still in memory, and if the file has become encrypted, we can restore these blocks from memory straight to the file. So we have a universal approach to reverse if a file becomes encrypted. So now I brought this slide. Yesterday I spent a lot of time on this slide. I brought this one because I want to illustrate why our product is very different compared to from the other leaders. We got LeaderA. For your information, normally I don't mention this in a slide, but this is Microsoft, this is ESET, this is CrowdStrike, this is SentinelOne. Everybody has ransomware protection, but they differ. They differ. That's because if you have typically in your network environment, you have workstations, and you have a soft protection on this machine. So, for example, if you have CrowdStrike, it uses artificial intelligence to see if a file that comes on the box, if it has malicious properties, if it looks like similar behaviors to ransomware. But if it is completely, that analysis all happens on this box. But this workstation also has access to the servers. When the adversary is on this box and runs his ransomware, it happens on this machine. But what if you have one machine that is not protected in your network? Only one is sufficient. If you have Microsoft or any of the other leaders from the Gartner quadrant, one unprotected machine is sufficient for you to lose all your data if you have one of these products on your boxes. Because all the analysis happens on the infected machine. The infected machine here runs the ransomware, and it simply opens the file over the network, it encrypts it and writes it back. Even if this machine is protected, all the malicious activity happens here. Basically, the server only receives new files. Especially Microsoft, which is in the business of developing an operating system and maintain compatibility with software that was created years and years ago. They do not offer this type of protection by investigating the documents. None of these vendors investigate your documents if they became encrypted. They all look for, there are a lot of file handles open by this process, and there's a lot of writes by this process. And if it happens a lot, then it can decide to block it. What's also interesting is that none of these first three vendors here actually have any rollback capability. So even if you have, if a lot of files became encrypted, they are unable to restore it. Interesting, SentinelOne has, of course, they have a rollback capability. They use volume shadow copies, which works on the local machine, but that doesn't shield the machines. That doesn't shield the encryption that happens here on the server. So you can, even though you have some rollback capability, which need to be rolled back manually within 4 hours, and everybody, I don't think everybody has an IT specialist in-house that operates during the night. But you need to roll back within the 4 hours of the attack, because typically by default the rollback is set up to take snapshots by volume shadow copy every 4 hours. If you miss that window of opportunity, it creates a new snapshot and rollback becomes a lot more complicated. As I mentioned, too often you have an unmonitored machine in the network. It could be a friend of yours, or a colleague, or another company who is working in your environment. What's also interesting is that all these vendors nowadays is a heavy focus on the MITRE ATT&CK framework and logging everything to the cloud, adding context and visualizing it for your security operations center. But know that this information that's being logged to the cloud, if you have 1,000 machines, every process that you open, every file that you touch, all this information is being logged to the cloud. Typically this happens, it can take really 10 minutes, but in practice it takes at least 20 minutes before this information is transmitted to the cloud. processed and prepared for you to visualize in your dashboard. But if you are being hit by, for example, the Lockbit ransomware, which is very popular, I think it's next to Black Cat, it's the #1 ransomware out there. The Lockbit ransomware doesn't encrypt your entire files. It only takes a first block of a file, which is 4 kilobytes, and encrypts those 4 kilobytes. That is sufficient to malform all your files. But it can encrypt 25,000 files per minute, so the faster storage medium you have, the faster you become encrypted. So you can do the math. If the telemetry takes 10 minutes to arrive in the cloud to make a verdict, or for some incident responder to respond, you have already lost 250,000 files. And if you don't have any rollback capability, you have a slight problem. And also I wanted to know, for attackers, the minimum bar to beat is at least Microsoft, because everybody, at least when you install Defender, when you install Windows, you get Defender, which is a good product. It offers a lot of information if you want to Lego your own cybersecurity protection. Defender is fine, but don't expect that it will help you in a very elaborate ransomware attack. This is not a corner case that I mentioned here. This happens all the time. Even at Sophos customers, this is actually happening. We sell licenses to protect machines, but it's very difficult for IT organizations to deploy the software on their machines. It's their responsibility to install it on the boxes. And sometimes they only buy licenses for half the estate, and the other half of the estate still remains on, for example, Trellix or some other product. That means you do not have complete visibility what is going on. You cannot query those devices. You cannot hunt for a potential attacker. You're in a whole lot of trouble if ransomware hits. Of course, we also at Sophos we are a company that nowadays also provides an MDR service, managed detection and response. That means we have a 24-hour service where we have skilled technical people to keep an eye on the alerts that happen, and the telemetry that happens in your estates, and notify and act on behalf of you to keep the attacker out. This is an example where managed detection and response will not help. This is an example where good protection will help. This example is the Screen Connect, ConnectWise remote management and monitoring software. This MSP that uses this software was breached, and the attacker created an installation package and sent it to the victim. So the victims themselves, these companies, were not breached by themselves. It was the MSP that was breached. And the payload was called explorer.exe. It was not in the typical Windows folder, but it was mimicking the file name of a well-known process on Windows. What's interesting is here that the file came on the box on 5 minutes past 12, and 6 minutes past 12, encryption started. So there was only 1 minute for this event to be uploaded to the cloud, being processed, and a human responser or even an automatic responser by machine learning to act on it and say we have to block this. So good protection is very important, especially when you're dealing with ransomware, and that's sadly enough often the case. Of course, ransomware is at the end of the attack chain. It's in the impact phase. Ideally, and especially where all the other vendors are also focusing on, is you want to keep the attacker from the network, from your network in the first place. So, and when you're dealing with a human attacker, they need to have an implant, or they have to have some keyboard access, so they can run commands on the machines in your estate. So if you're able to hinder these implants, you can thwart the entire ransomware attack, and maybe backtrack how the attacker came in and solve it. We have a different approach, even if we have also we also apply the same approach that some of the other vendors are using. You know, trying to scan for a cobalt strike and typical similar implants. But what we do with our Sophos anti-exploitation platform is that we apply a zero trust model on memory interaction. And what does that mean? We're guarding the process integrity, and we're hardening the memory of the application, and we apply execution guardrails at runtime without us knowing how the source code is structured, and we do not need to have the source code. So basically we have somewhat of an API firewall. Because what the problem here is, if the attacker comes on your box and has the privileges to do whatever he wants, he also has complete freedom in memory. And that's where we want to apply some limitations. So just a little bit of schooling here. Since 2003, Windows XP Service Pack 2 received data execution prevention. That means from that moment on, applications need to, the code in applications, if they want to allocate more memory with certain permissions, they have to specifically ask this from the operating system. Because before, the entire memory of a process space is executable. So if you have a vulnerability and there's some shellcode, you run into potential that shellcode can basically run, because the entire memory space is already executable. So in the new situation since 2003, which is not unique to Windows but also for Linux and Mac OS, you need to say if you want to allocate memory, you need to say what type of memory it is. So if it is only for reading and writing, or if it is for reading and execution, for example. So even if you have a vulnerability there, the shellcode is typically cannot run code, and the processor, the microprocessor itself, the hardware, will prevent from code execution running from that memory region. Knowing this, the attackers needed to, if you have a payload inside a legitimate application, for example, it needs to decrypt itself. In order to decrypt itself, it needs to allocate some workspace. It typically, we call that a heap memory. And typically when you're dealing with a multi-stage attack, this decrypted code is a stager. It basically figures out, do I need to download a 32-bit payload or an implant or 64-bit? Am I running into the network environment of my target? And if it decides, yeah, I need to download a 64-bit implant, it allocates some more memory and downloads the Cobalt Strike beacon straight into the memory, so it doesn't touch the disk. So even if you have advanced machine learning or pre-execution scanning or whatever, it's not in play here because it immediately drops into memory. And the interesting cases here with Cobalt Strike beacon, once you have it in memory, it sleeps for 99.9999% of the time, doing nothing. It sleeps dormant in memory, and it lies there in memory encrypted. So it's very hard to spot in memory because of this encryption as well. But this typical behavior is what we call heap behavior. And when we developed the mitigation against this type of behavior with a project what we called Heap Array, but our marketing didn't like it, so they called it dynamic shellcode protection, is that we actually do not allow any application on the box from allocating executable memory space from code running on the heap. So you cannot allocate more heap memory when it comes from the heap memory. And this actually works great without causing any problems with your regular day-to-day legitimate applications. A cool example here is, you probably all heard from the 3CX supply chain attack. We caught another supply chain attack in August last year. It's from COM100 live chat. Interestingly, also a communications application, just like 3CX. And while we did not know that we actually block this type of memory allocations all the time, we weren't aware that we weren't immediately aware that this was a supply chain attack But here you can see that the attacker used the DLL. The malware itself was in a DLL, and they brought they installed through the live chat application the Microsoft MD Merge utility, but they named it Microsoft Framework, and they put the malicious DLL alongside this MD Merge. So there was a DLL side-loading attack, whereby this shell code was is meant to download the implant. So it's very little code, but we did not allow this to happen. So this mitigation does not only block typical implants for Cobalt Strike, but in the recent the 2 years that it's now operational, we also block certain ransomware with it, and as I mentioned, a supply chain attack as well. So in this example, for COM100, we blocked the additional allocations. So before the remote access tool, the RET, was able to install. This is another example where I wanted to highlight a little bit that there was no prevention from LeaderA. Maybe you remember who that was. Well, how do I know LeaderA did not prevent this? Normally LeaderA is very good at blocking this. A friend of mine works at a very large school in the Netherlands, and he operates an environment with LeaderA software. Everything was enabled, including block EDR mode, etc. But because this specific behavior was what this school received an email with a password and a spear phishing link, the user clicked on the link that downloaded a file from the browser. This was a malicious file, and in that malicious file was a zip file, and in that zip file was the password protected zip file, and the password was here in the mail. So the victim entered it. It got an ISO file, which is a virtual CD-ROM. It mounted it and went through the Explorer and opened the LNK file. And from there, it became invisible and actions happened automatically. But since, it also involves copying of a legitimate application and decrypting the payload in memory, we blocked it proactively. But LeaderA said they had a very nice information after 10-15 minutes, and they also said it's possible Quackbot activity. Yeah, you're all right. Why not block it? He actually went back to Microsoft to see why they wasn't blocked, but it wasn't. They weren't. The engine wasn't certain enough to apply a blocking in that mode. The product was properly configured. This is how it looks like. You know, the zip with the ISO file with the password that you need to enter, and this actually is all done by this school employee. And you can also see there were actually on the CD-ROM some images which were purposely put there just to thwart some analysis by other vendors, because if it was only a DLL and a script, some vendors will block it. But the attacker went so far to add some decoy files and also use text vocabulary from dictionaries to thwart analysis, because if it's random, some vendors have analysis on random string detection, etc. This is another example, again a Quackbot, one of the most prolific Trojans out there. They sell their access that they've gained to ransomware actors like Black Cat. This one was using a Microsoft OneNote file. Every victim received a uniquely generated file. It had a button called Open. What's interesting here, by the way, before I forget to mention, OneNote doesn't have any macros. So normally you would say, oh, you'll block the macros, but this one OneNote doesn't support any macros, but it does support. You can embed an object in there, and then this object can be a Windows script file, a batch file, HTA file, etc. But what's interesting here, this image here, if you hover above it, if you want to save this image to your local disk, you get the file name from the that was given to this object on the machine from the threat actor. And this is this Russian. It says untitled drawing. So even on my Dutch machine, you will get this Russian text. In this case, since we also have a lockdown in place, we block it even earlier. And this is just the anti-exploitation platform that I'm talking about. Sophos also offers all the other layers of defense that do script analysis, etc. So we apply application hardening. We do that. We do not shy to block a legitimate process, because typically when you're under attack by an adversary, the adversary wants to hide in a process that is always live on your machine. So, but also sometimes they hijack a legitimate process, and they will let that legitimate process do the encryption for it. So it becomes very hard for some vendors to offer protection against a ransomware attack. And also all of our anti-exploitation technology is signature agnostic. So we do not look for specific patterns in the code or whatever. We look at the behavior as the code executes on the processor. We analyze the stack, etc. So we do not only block exploitation of software vulnerabilities, because that's typically what I can imagine that you expect from an anti-exploit solution. But we apply these to system-wide to every process. It's not only for anti-exploit, for covering for software bugs, but especially looking for the techniques deployed by adversaries. So this is this is just a short overview. We even have a lot more. We have 60 mitigations in place, which are all by default on, and we have them by default on because we are certain that these will not give you any trouble with your legitimate applications, which is also very different from how Microsoft delivers their Lego tools. You have to do all the protection yourself and do all the testing yourself, do all the exclusions yourself. You have to do all the things yourself. If you want to do everything yourself, go for Microsoft. But for example, our dynamic shellcode protection looks for your analyzes your workspace memory. We keep an eye on how what memory addresses are on the stack. We shield the process environment block because that can be manipulated to run malicious code. We have code hooks in NT-DLL, kernel 32, but we also shield these DLLs, like AMSI DLL. And this DLL is an important Windows functionality, the anti-malware scan interface, because if this is being manipulated, you can no longer get reliable detection on obfuscated scripts, for example. This is always the first thing that an attacker tries to disable, alongside with Windows event tracing for Windows, which is where all the EDR products rely on as well. And also we shield the code that makes up your program against manipulation by other processes. So your processes cannot be manipulated to do malicious things. As I mentioned, we have over 60 proprietary mitigations. Microsoft also offers a lot through Windows. It's not Defender itself, but through Windows they apply them themselves. But you have to apply them yourselves. They only apply for certain applications. So it does. It's not confidential, by the way. Or maybe make a picture quick. But I think we are the only security vendor that develops and deploys these novel on-device protections, so it doesn't rely on the cloud or use any signatures. Simply by we apply memory hardening at scale for every application. So as mentioned, we have over 50 million endpoints without issues. New mitigation we also have if we detect, for example, and if we see something happening on one of your endpoints, we can put your endpoint for 24 hours in a bit of a lockdown mode. You cannot install any new code on there, even if it's legitimate code. So your investigators that you have on your own team or our MDR team can investigate and have a little bit more time to do the analysis, because human work simply takes a bit of time. In most cases, we do all within half an hour. But even that half an hour, we need that half hour. even if it's in the night. So with our platform you get less telemetry, you get more enriched telemetry that matters, so you don't have to chase potential false alarms, less potential false alarms, and you have enriched investigations that you can supply to management, and you have a better picture of what happened and what has been prevented. It's not just Gartner that says, Gartner talks with our customers, and it appears our customers are very happy with us. We have 5 times as more reviews as CrowdStrike, 3.5 times more as Microsoft, simply because we are also around for a long time, so we know as Sophos what we are doing, and have the experience to deal with all types of threats that you can encounter in your business. And it's not just our customers, but also G2, which is also a industry analyst, and we have the only solution that where we are a leader in all the categories. So, just to highlight a little bit of, maybe you remember Sophos from very old days as a antivirus vendor. I think we are at the forefront with our the latest technologies, and we're changing how Windows works to keep attackers out, because we think it is a bit too open for today's threat landscape. And with this, I want to end my talk. If you have any questions, we are here at the Kappa Data booth at the front of the show. So please visit there, or just come for a brief talk here. I'm happy to take your questions. And for now, because I'm a little bit over time, thank you for your attendance, and see you later.